Well, it's time to go orange pilling with Max and Stacy right here with our year-end review, really digging into the trends and topics and excitement of 2022 as we head to 2023. Stacy!
Right. Well, I would actually call this...
We're off to a roaring start. Stacy! Stacy! Would I have a booger coming out of my nose or something? No. I told you to put that nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide. Oxide?
Nitrous
Okay.
oxide.
Yeah,
Nitrous.
Yeah. Nitrous.
Yeah.
We
No,
have a
this
helpful
is our
canister.
end of 2022 Max and Stacy report.
Of course. Of course it is.
Why do you have to make me laugh?
I don't know. This has been the curse of my life. I can make people spontaneously laugh. I could do it.
It's true. I've seen it happen so
Yeah.
many times. You walk into a coffee shop and people just start
They
laughing.
start laughing.
It's always the women, though. Like, men don't laugh at you. They always want to punch you.
Yeah, exactly. That's been kind of my life. And I resented it at one point, even when I was doing stand-up comedy. I was like, why are you laughing at me? And I'm like, dude, you're a comic. You know, it was always so confusing.
But I've seen it so many times. There's two things that always happen to you.
Yeah.
Always. Like,
Yeah.
only you. I've never seen it with anybody else.
No.
Is women start laughing.
Yeah.
They just, as soon as you ask for a cup of coffee, they're
like,
that is so funny.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm just asking for a cup of coffee. Especially if it's in a foreign language. They just start laughing.
Yeah, I just have immediate rapport,
Yeah.
you know, with women. And then with men, of course, I just immediate antagonism, and I usually get into a fist fight.
And then there's the other thing is the babies. They'll
Yeah.
be like, you know, crying at some restaurant table next to us. And then they're like crying and their mom's trying to make them stop crying and feeding them. And then they look over and they see Max and they go, "Ah," and they stop crying and they just stare at you in wonderment.
Yeah, that's the big baby. That's the big baby eyes.
Look, I got some water.
Oh, that's great.
I
There's
think-
just some random construction workers walking around. That's nice.
Anyway, we're doing this show we're borrowing a studio. This will be our studio in a real studio when our new Orange Pill show starts to air in January, later in January. We're borrowing El Blog, which is the #1 show, I think, live stream in El Salvador. They do a daily live blog at 8 o'clock p.m. local time. And I really like their backgrounds, these neon signs. So we're going to have some made as well. We're going to revise the opening titles. I think we'll stick with the same ones with Orange Pill Podcast at the end. Oh, look, they're playing clips of El Blog in the background while we speak.
Oh,
so this
that's
is
cool.
the end of 2022
So what about the
special.
other Orange Pill introduction video and music?
Yeah, but it's very long, and we don't actually have any titles. Like it's a long one.
Oh, right. Maybe
Yeah.
use it as an outro.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
This one's a shorter one. I think so. Anyway, so this is 2022. We're ending the year, and
Yeah.
we're doing a year roundup and looking forward to 2023. That's why when we tried to do the live stream in the studio, and it didn't work, something incompatible with our YouTube channel and their TriCaster.
Yeah. Maybe we could go back and forth because that other one actually has Orange Pill in the music. It uses the lyrics.
Okay. So the thing is that, I was looking through, I was writing up a list of, the best things about 2022.
Yeah.
And, it was an amazing year for us because we moved to El Salvador on January 3rd, of course, which is the Genesis Block Day, and it was our Genesis Day here in El Salvador, January 3rd, 2022. We flew in from Mexico City, in fact. We had been in Mexico City, and then we flew here and never really left because we were only here at that time for a interview with the president, President Bukele, who never gave us the interview, by the way.
No.
But we stayed here and, working our ass off, right?
Yeah, we talked to his cat. That was nice.
Well, I'm sure some old ladies in the croissant shop would laugh at that one.
They love it.
I actually had one. I made the women laugh there because I asked for a croissant.
Yeah.
The thing about America and American English is we pronounce the words, because we're a nation of immigrants, we pronounce the words as they were originally spoken. So we'll say duvet instead of
The French version.
Yeah, the French version.
The French, they were part of a proxy war back in the American
yeah, or the
Revolution.
German, or whatever the original pronunciation of the word is from a word based on like entrepreneur, and
It's French.
yeah, we'll pronounce it the way it was, right?
Yeah. 'Cause
So we say croissant.
Yeah.
Like I tried to but they just started laughing so hard, and they were like, "What do you want?"
yeah.
And I was
How do they
like,
pronounce it here?
I can't even. I
Yeah.
tried to say croissant.
Yeah.
Croissant. I can't say it right, but they still they see me and they start to laugh because they know I'm going to ask for a croissant.
They do the
And-
same, yeah.
Croissant.
But the name
Anyway,
of the place is Le Croissant.
Le croissant.
That's the name of the place. They would think. I would think they would go with the actual pronunciation in the French version. But
Exactly. It's not like un croissant. They don't use they're not doing it in Spanish pronunciation, are they? If they
No.
did, if they were, they would say un instead of le.
Exactement.
Exactement. So 2022 for me is the year we got tricked into moving here.
Oh, really?
and it was, but it was the best thing, right? It's a life-altering transformation. We're part of the transformation, and El Salvador is going through a transformation. It's a profound transformation down to the root, the foundation of the country. Earlier in the year, it started kind of as a great rebrand. I call it the greatest rebrand in history.
Right.
And, it is a rebrand in one way, and you could see in the headlines, those are surface, right? Those headlines, just like quick, brief headlines of if you look through, when we first arrived, we first visited in November of 2021 and then moved here January 3rd, 2022. And if you did any Google searches, all you saw was homicide, 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 don't go, it's dangerous, deadly. Those are the only headlines in the mainstream media about El Salvador. That's what you saw, MS-13, gangs,
Right.
things like that. Now, the rebrand is evident if you do a simple Google search and look through the news. You don't really see that. You see some of the exception regime, but it's mostly about Bitcoin, about all this.
But I think you were hinting
fun
at something
things.
there, that it's more of a transformative situation, because a rebrand is essentially the same thing but rebranded, right? So it's like, we make sneakers and we still make sneakers, and we're going to call them something a little bit different than what we called them last year.
Yeah.
But here it's an actual transformation that has been multi-decade transformation into something entirely new. A safest country in Latin America, this dynamic leader, President Bukele, who's inspired a nation to come together and build something spectacular. And so that goes beyond rebranding. It's transformative.
Yeah, it's beyond rebranding because it's down to the foundation of the essence of the individuals who make up the society here.
Yeah.
That you could see that they,
It's a metamorphosis.
President Bukele, the way he sees El Salvador, the way he talks about El Salvador, the words he has said about El Salvador, don't ever let them tell you that we're too small to be big.
Right.
This is one of the things I first, started quoting of his when we arrived January 3rd, 2022. Where El Salvador is going is to the place we want to be.
Yeah.
We are going to transform this place. And he said it convincing enough. That's something that you've always had with Keiser Report, and why you've had an audience around the world is that sort of liberation theology. He has that sort of liberation theology manner about him in terms of inspiring his flock of, people listening to him, his population,
Well, he's
to
definitely
believe in
inspiring,
themselves.
with his rhetoric and his presence. And I think that following his career, going back, to when he was a mayor, is that he saw an opportunity that the country had become I would say somewhat paralyzed with political dysfunction. And he said to himself, you know what, all it would take is a little spit and polish, and we could totally turn this thing around. And just started the momentum, started the ball rolling. And of course, the people responded really well to this. And he did simple things at first, like getting people a house, getting somebody a roof, getting something, building a road, building a bridge. And it just resonated. And then it just became this groundswell of support. And now it's being transformative on the whole nation is happening. And I love on Twitter, they have the Minister of the Interior who just tracks public projects. And every day they're like, a new road, a new bridge, a new irrigation project. And they're just like rebuilding everything from the ground up.
Well, actually, that was the last time the president retweeted me, was when I had mentioned, he had tweeted about that new road going out to Surf City 2, the Punta Mango area. And what I said is Bastiat would have recognized exactly what is happening here in El Salvador. He would have seen that plunder is no longer a way of life for a group of men in society. Plunder is no longer happening here. And as a result, the legal system, the justice system, no longer justifies it and creates a structure to justify it. And the moral code is now celebrates and glorifies not plunder, but actually building. So that's why you're going to see more and more building. That's why, because your moral system now no longer applauds plunder.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, the fiat fraud world does.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it gets back to Bitcoin. Bitcoin being perfect money and everything that comes with it. And we see that happening on the ground for sure.
And I want to read you a tweet that I posted. This is from a woman who responded to my tweet, where I'll read you the tweet so that you can see what she was responding to in terms of how, like I said, the transformation is on many different layers here. So there's a transformative leader, an actual leader, statesman.
Yeah.
And, the four qualities of a statesman, if you research it online, are things like, he has to have a vision, or he or she has a vision, principles, a moral compass, and then an ability to persuade people to the vision. So that's, there's often one missing, but you could have all the vision in the world and all the great morals and all the great principles.
Right.
But if you're not an orator, if you're not convincing, if you can't...
It's all or nothing. You need all four qualities.
You need all of them.
The whole quadriceps.
So, he's transformed the society, the economy, the culture, but also us. Like, that's why we're here. That's why we stayed here, even though we didn't get the interview yet. We stayed here for the transformation that happened within us.
Well, it's the biggest story in the world, for sure, especially for Bitcoiners. So as a journalist, I feel compelled to be here to report on it, because it's the biggest, this is the tip of the spear for the Bitcoin revolution. And we're seeing it happen in real time on the ground. And it's interesting that the perception still lags reality. So you still have the mainstream press reporting on El Salvador in ways that are, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 20 years out of date. And in that gap, a lot of people are moving here, entrepreneurs and young families looking for a new beginning. And they're taking advantage of that arbitrage between what's the facts on the ground and the way it's being reported.
Well, that's very, very typical of all cycle bottoms, right? So they've been on basically a 200-year downtrend, whereas it makes total sense, Max, because it's the opposite of the fiat world, where we've had 200-year bull market in bonds, right?
Right.
200 years bull market. So interest rates kept declining for 200 years. Debt kept blossoming for 200 years. And we're at the end of that. So it makes sense at the same time somebody was having to pay for it somewhere, right? The third world was paying for it, whether it was Africa or Asia or Latin America, was paying for that bond bubble for the past 200 and something years.
Right.
So now you've had, especially in the last 40, 50 years, where like the ultimate bottom, right? That was the sell-off. This was what was happening in El Salvador, was like civil war, massacres, all the horrible, the gang wars, mass flight, migration out of here. You had two parties that were very corrupt, plundering massively. Now you're seeing the same thing in the West, but what happened here is that you hit bottom, and now nobody believes it. So that's what happens when the cycle changes, right? So nobody believes the good times when they're coming. You often talk about when you first started on Wall Street in 1982, it had been a 16-year bear market. And nobody believed it when all the good times started to come. They were like, yeah, right. Never going to happen.
This is climbing the wall of worry.
Yes.
Right? So nobody believes it. I remember when Apple Computer turned around in the late 90s, and nobody would believe it. Michael Dell from Dell Computer told Steve Jobs he should find a real job and just declare bankruptcy because Apple Computer was going to zero. Now it became the most valuable company in the world. So yeah, I think that's a good point. It has been a 200-year downtrend. If you look at the fiat money world, the introduction of central banks, the Bank of England and all the subsequent central banks, and how they dominated the globe with their fiat money Ponzi schemes, and that bubble burst, and now we're seeing the rise of those economies and countries that were the client states of those central banks, and the result is a complete reversal. And the market is not recognizing this, and but for a few Sharpies that are moving in and taking advantage of this complete reversal.
Well, the developing world was pretty much the collateral. Like they were what was backing all the fiat fraud. But I'll tell you about this tweet and the response here. So I had tweeted that in 2023, of course, everybody's looking forward to 2023, this new year coming up, and El Salvador is going to be like the amount of work we did here in 2022 is just remarkable. And 2023 is going to demonstrate the proof of us working in 2022, what has been happening here. Not only getting rid of the plunder, down to the root here, as you see, liberating the, all parts of El Salvador, not just the wealthy parts. All of El Salvador has been liberated in 2022, and all of the groundwork of, the Bitcoin embassies, the Bitcoin office, the securities law, all the stuff we've done over the past year will really pay off in 2023. But I tweeted that in 2023, we will see some of the amazing results of the greatest rebrand in history. From financial innovation to culinary excellence and economic liberty, El Salvador will blaze a path forward out of the fiat dark ages and into a Renaissance 2.0 that few thought was possible. So what I was one of the responses from a Salvadoran woman was just remarkable, right? This is what you see with the diaspora, and this is what you see how President Bukele transformed us on a very fundamental, profound level. Our transformation is in turn, these are how network effects happen, right? Our transformation is transforming Salvadorans who fled El Salvador to the United States. So I'm going to read you what she wrote. Aine Ayala, she wrote, "My plan is to move back home to El Salvador. My dream business is to open a gourmet taqueria with everything made from scratch. I grew up in the USA, but if you, as a non-Salvadoran, see a brighter future for El Salvador and have so much hope about it, why me, as a Salvadoran, shouldn't?"
Right. Well, that's the diaspora is moving back, which is huge because they've got talent, they've got expertise, they've got capital. Then you've got the elimination of all the gangs, which is like adding a $6 billion dividend to the economy because that's the amount that was being extorted. Then you have just the Bitcoin layer as a base layer for the monetary unit that is transforming the economy. And if all those things added together, it results in a very positive GDP. Now, they just said for the quarter, GDP is going to be 2-point-something%. They're not going to have a recession in 2023. And in fact, they're going to have another boom year. So it's going to be one of the boomiest year of any country in the world, because all those things are coming together in a confluence of goodness.
Yeah, well, this is the title, is Preparing for Good Times in 2023. But even, that 2.2% or whatever the number you want to even say, that's part of an epoch, a 200-year epoch that is over. It's gone. It's done. This is the Renaissance 2.0. This is the rebirth. This is the beginning of something new. So there's something that can't be. How do you add it up? How do you add up that change in psychology, that change in the profound transformation that has happened here? That where a small country is so big and just keeps getting bigger.
Well, I think you'll see it in, for example, you mentioned the restaurant scene, and we have artisanal artists and chefs, which is like the vanguard of an artistic movement. So how do you express the Renaissance 2.0? It's expressed artistically. And this was the artifacts of Renaissance 1.0. We know it from Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. We go to the Louvre Museum in Paris, you'll see what happened in Renaissance 1.0. So what we'll see in 2023 would be the emergence of Salvadoran art and artists that'll make global impact. And that, I think, will be the artifacts for Renaissance 2.0. That's how you quantify it, and that's how you will represent it.
Yeah, we don't know what Renaissance 2.0 will bring. We see the remnants of Renaissance 1.0 in Florence. You walk around Florence and you see something profound happened there, right? It's hard to miss. Even hundreds of years later, you see that something remarkable happened at a certain moment in time. And, do we know any year whether or not GDP was up a certain percent or not like that? No. Is Lorenzo the Magnificent, does he have that name because he was like worth as much as Elon Musk or something?
Yeah,
no,
well,
it's what
the El Salvador Renaissance is taking place during an epoch in history of global financialization. So that was not the case during the Renaissance 1.0. You still had economies based on crafts, and GDP was measured by export-imports of stuff. And you didn't have the financialization that you have in the 21st century, the 20th century, and the 21st century. So, you have right now, as you alluded to, the collapse in this 200-year bull market in the bonds. And we're seeing this flame out spectacularly in the FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried catastrophe, where people are beginning to realize how everything was collateralized by everything else. So he purchased Robinhood, for example, the online trading app, by borrowing money against one set of collateral that was collateralized by a fake scam token that was collateralized by a loan that was rehypothecated from a hedge fund. And so that whole Ponzi scheme, a hologram of Ponzi schemes are evaporating, and into that mix comes a country like El Salvador with a Bitcoin standard that is now representing, as you call it, Renaissance 2.0, and it's hard to measure exactly beyond the simple GDP measure. But I think in 2023 we will start to see what that means sociologically with the population.
But even on on just some basic level, everybody knows that, right? Everybody knows that at the end of the day, all that matters is things like love and family and those sort of things, like how you feel inside and connection and human connection. So think of the value that has been added by the transformation that President Bukele has inspired, right? That sort of sense of hope. And Chimbetta is, out in Bitcoin Beach, she's the one that personifies it most to me, is just that story of him growing up, through the 80s, 90s, and just the getting used to despair. You just knew that life always got worse. Because you were always, not because of anything to do with money, but because your friends and family were always going to leave you. They were always going to go away. Why? Because your place was shit and somewhere else was better. So if you stayed behind, not only did you lose your loved ones, did you lose your connections, but you were the one that was remained behind while somebody else went to the good times out there. So now he said, over the past 3 years, he's in a situation where those friends and family that left all these decades ago, they're calling him and saying, what's going on there? Like, everybody's talking about El Salvador. I want to go back. Like, this isn't fair that everybody else is going back when I'm Salvadoran. I want to be there. So they're starting to return, and that brings him joy, love, hope, like good feelings inside that are just hard to add up to any sort of so I get really pissed off when I see that FUD. On one level, I get pissed off. And on one level, I'm pissed off that, all the FUD about El Salvador failing and President Bukele failing. They say that Bloomberg's and the Financial Times sort of publications that are the prison guards for the fiat system, right? They're the propagandists for that fiat fraud. Well, on the other hand, it just kind of, if we're at the beginning of this new Renaissance 2.0, we're still so early, right? Just like with Bitcoin, everybody, the amount of FUD used to be extraordinary 12 years ago, 11 years ago, 10 years ago. It was really just all negative, all like drug dealers. It was Silk Road. It was for bad guys. It was evil. At least now, there are senators who put laser eyes on and stuff like that. There was none of that back then, but those were the very, very early days. And same here in El Salvador. It's like getting into Bitcoin in 2011.
Absolutely. And that's really the place to be, is El Salvador, in terms of if you're a Bitcoiner. That's why when I say that if you are a Bitcoiner, you need to visit, for one thing, you need to visit El Salvador and see what it's like to have a Bitcoin standard, a Bitcoin is legal tender, and an orange-pilled president, and a population that is completely aware of it. The adoption rate here, when I say it's 100%, because everyone is aware of it, and once you become aware of it, you are changed by it. We say that you don't change Bitcoin, Bitcoin changes you. And that can happen just by thinking about it, because if you're thinking about an absolutely scarce synthetic digital commodity that is replacing all for previous forms of money going back hundreds of thousands of years to give us perfect money and perfect transactions and a seamless interconnectivity and the liberation of the collective unconscious, you see that we are on the cusp of what we would call the Bitcoin singularity. And it's happening right here. The portal into the Bitcoin singularity is probably underneath one of these volcanoes. I go out there every morning and I search for it. And I go up volcanoes and I climb them and I look for the portal into the Bitcoin singularity because I know it's here. And we're making a little film about that right now. I'm seeking a producer for that. But
Okay.
it's the Bitcoin search for the Bitcoin singularity through the jungles of El Salvador.
Into the volcanoes, that's kind of actually a surprise to me as well, is how many little little earthquakes there are here in El Salvador all the time. Because when I lived in Los Angeles, you see who speaks the loudest, right? You have earthquakes there, maybe 2 a year that you feel.
Yeah.
And it's screaming, loud headlines, trending topic on Twitter, all that sort of thing. And you're for 3, 4.0 sort of thing. And here it's every few weeks, and it's
it's the perception. In Los Angeles, I equate the earthquakes there with death, but here, when I feel it, I feel life. It's a complete different feeling. It's just like Earth, giving birth. So it's like you're riding the volcano, you're riding the wave, you're riding the jungle pulse of all that vegetation out there just screaming for oxygen, and it's just coming out of every possible square inch of fertile soil, and all the coffee oozing out of the beans and down my throat into my gullet, giving me that buzz that I only get in El Salvador. So I can truly see beyond the Bitcoin singularity.
Exactly. It was the volcanic eruption 1,000 years ago, the Salvadoran Vesuvius.
Yeah.
I think it was in Lake Ilopango, that's the remnants of it. But I think that that gave them the right to declare that El Salvador is the home of the pupusa, because in the, the people encrusted in ash,
Yeah.
they had some pupusas, basically.
The people encrusted in ash. That's a recipe that I have not seen in any of my Julia Child French cooking books. The encrusted people in ash. But nevertheless, it gives legitimacy to the pupusa, is what you're saying. It carbon dates the. I have my pupusa, make pupusas not war shirt on.
Yep.
Ready to go. And it's soul food. It's Salvadoran soul food. And you can live your entire life on only pupusas, which is something people probably are not aware of.
Well, most people are not aware of is like there's the Pacific Ocean right there,
Yeah.
and the Pacific Ocean provides a lot of protein and the bounty of fish.
You mean the fish?
It's just like
You eat
loads of
coffee.
fish. Yeah, you can have dine very well here on amazing
Right, the
fish.
streets are littered with mangoes.
Mangoes.
All the mangoes you can stuff in a bag you can have, you're just falling off the tree. It's like the Garden of Eden. All the fish are right there just jumping into the boat. Food is aplenty. I don't see anybody, when I see these scenes in the U.S., for example, in San Francisco and others, where you have a lot of people on the street, a lot of people are hungry, a lot of people are starving. I don't see that at all. I have not traveled extensively throughout the country, but I just don't. There's just a lot of food around. It's just a lot of food, and it's not that hard to get food. People are not hungry in El Salvador, number one. And number two, as all the other positive things we just mentioned, it just adds on to this huge, really good times.
Well, I have seen loads of mangoes, loads of coconuts, and loads of papaya. Like in the forest, like in the jungle along the highway. Like it's all over the place. So it is pretty remarkable, and lots of fish. I love the fish. The Pacific Ocean has, I think, the best fish, especially since the Atlantic, it's all fished out. It's all like we depleted that up in New England. It used to be just filled with sea bass and cod, and now it's just wiped out.
Cod wars wiped out the whole stock.
Well, cod wars, I believe, were in the North Atlantic, right?
Yeah,
between Iceland and UK.
Yeah.
But okay, Max.
Well, I love those whole stories of the cod wars.
Well, that's another story because we're in El Salvador. This is the home of Renaissance 2.0, and that's the thing. When I was looking back, in the last few minutes here, that I was writing a list of all the great things that happened in 2022. And, I'm working on a list as well for the Bitcoin office. We're going to publish the 21 top things that happened in Bitcoin in El Salvador in 2022. And there's just it's just weird that I occasionally get interrupted by all the good things happening here with some news from the outside world popping through on Twitter where you see just horrible stuff. All of the shitcoin collapses, all of them. And it's just like so many people we know just trap who got involved in these shitcoins, like the whole FTX thing, like Celsius, all these people who are trapped with their funds lost that, they should have known better than to chase that yield. That's even the fiat world, that's how you die, right? That's how your wealth dies, is chasing yield like that. Well, they all died doubly because it was also shitcoinery, right? So seeing these blizzards, seeing this wars, seeing the extreme breakdown of society in the United States.
Yeah.
The Twitter files has kind of exposed it, the authoritarianism and the hysteria and just the hatred and despair, the deaths of despair, like what we were saying, here it went from despair to hope, right? And good times and positive optimism and things like that.
The basic American character is one of neighborly kind of respect, if you will, and a certain egalitarianism. And these big corporations are constantly taking advantage of that. It could be the banking industry, the pharmaceutical industry, or any of these industries. They're constantly just taking advantage of the basic American kind-heartedness to rip them off. And they're just going to kill the golden goose. You know, they're just not going to run out of middle-class Americans to rip off. And then what?
Well, again, we're here in El Salvador. That's what I'm saying is like, it wasn't necessarily like pointing at the United States and like wanting to talk about that. I was just saying like here, there's so much good stuff happening. And, you know, 2023, we're going to prepare for good times. So I'm saying like I'm preparing for good times for 2023. I know there's a lot of good stuff happening in the first 6 months of the year. I've seen it myself, and I know it's coming. And you know, we'll get to that the volcano top.
That's right. We will.
I was going to say the Martin Luther King Jr. is saying
top.
to get to the mountaintop, but then I was going to say mountaintop, and then I was like, you got to get to the volcano top.
You've been to the volcano top.
I've been to the top of the volcano.
Yeah, I may not get there with you.
That's how we met Josue. We met Josue up on the volcano top. The top of the volcano.
And also Sheik Roberto.
Sheik Roberto.
Sheik Roberto.
We met those big dogs.
Boston and the other big dogs. Yeah, huge dogs. As big as a house roaming around up there. This gigantic land of giant dogs.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we'll have to get back there soon. Our buddy Josue.
Yeah. Well, so that's it for this last episode of 2022. The Max and Stacy Report will be coming back to you next year as Orange Pill, because Orange Pill is, you know, the command we got from the leader of this nation, Najib Bukele, President Najib Bukele. He said, you know, when we first moved here, he signed my book. I had this, his biography.
Yeah.
Kianez Najib. And he signed it saying, Dear Max and Stacy, keep orange pilling the world.
Orange Pill Podcast.
So that's why we're orange pilling the world. It was a command.
Yeah, that's right. So, you know, he's a smart guy. And I think he's got good taste in podcasts. What can I say? He's a smart guy.
Well, it's been an amazing ride in 2022, and I hope, you know, our transformation helped you transform as well into something more positive and brighter and better.
You can't beat the chemistry. That's the thing. You can't beat it.
That's right.
That's what works.
So we'll see you in 2023. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.